Max Verstappen's teammate has just publicly said what no one in the paddock had the courage to admit. Isaac Hadjar declared that Verstappen was absolutely unbeatable under the previous rules, and that the new 2026 regulations have changed everything. But the real bombshell isn't this statement. The real bombshell is what's happening behind the scenes between Verstappen and Red Bull. Because the four-time world champion has an exit clause in his contract that allows him to leave the team as early as October, and Red Bull tried to buy out that clause by offering him tens of millions of dollars. Verstappen refused. He refused the money and refused to publicly commit to the team for 2027. This means the most dominant driver of his generation could leave Red Bull within a few weeks. And this isn't journalistic speculation. These are real contractual clauses that Verstappen has refused to give up despite a multi-million-dollar offer. What's about to happen could rewrite the history of Formula One. Let's start with Hadjar's words, because they are explosive in what they reveal about the internal dynamics at Red Bull. The 21-year-old Frenchman spoke openly during Red Bull's Talking Bull podcast. He said Verstappen completely dominated the previous generation's cars, and that under those rules it was impossible to beat him. No teammate had ever managed it. Hajar is the seventh different driver to sit on the other side of Verstappen's garage since 2018. None of the six before him had ever managed to credibly approach the Dutchman's level. Daniel Ricciardo, Alexander Albon, Pierre Gasly, Sergio Perez, all were overshadowed by Verstappen's devastating talent. But with the 2026 rules, the situation has changed radically, and Hajar is proving that Verstappen's absolute dominance may be over for good. Subscribe to the channel right now and leave a comment, because in a moment I'll reveal the details of the contract clause that could blow up the Formula One driver market. Hajar admitted that the regulation change helped him enormously. The new cars represent completely new territory for both drivers, and this has wiped out the huge advantage Verstappen had built up over years of perfect adaptation to the previous generation's cars. The Frenchman sits in 8th place in the championship with 68 points, just 41 points behind Verstappen. For a driver in his first full year in Formula One, finding himself this close to a four-time world champion is an extraordinary result that confirms just how much the new rules have leveled the playing field. The 2026 cars, with their active aerodynamics and the 50-50 split between the combustion engine and the electric battery, have created an entirely new paradigm that has zeroed out the advantages Verstappen had built up over the years. Former Formula One steward Johnny Herbert made an observation that has shaken the entire paddock. He said Hajar is doing something no Verstappen teammate had ever managed to do before. He's making Verstappen doubt himself. For the first time in the Dutchman's career, there's a driver on the other side of the garage who doesn't just follow the number one's instructions, but actively pushes to beat him. And this is creating a psychological pressure on Verstappen that he had never experienced within his own team before. For a driver used to dominating without internal opposition, discovering that his rookie teammate is capable of openly challenging him represents a shock that goes beyond mere sporting results. Like this video because the most incredible part of this story concerns Verstappen's contract and Red Bull's desperate moves to keep him. Now let's get to the issue that could change the fate of Formula One forever. Verstappen's contract with Red Bull contains an exit clause tied to his position in the drivers' standings. If the Dutchman is not among the top two in the standings by the Singapore Grand Prix 2026, which will be raced in October, he will have the right to unilaterally terminate the contract. At the moment, Verstappen is 6th in the championship, 110 points behind Antonelli. To get into the top two, he would need to overtake Hamilton, Norris, Leclerc, and Piastri within just a few races. A scenario that's practically impossible with the current RB22, a car that Verstappen himself has repeatedly called impossible to drive and has compared to a Formula 3 car in terms of its handling characteristics. But this isn't Verstappen's only way out. According to Automoto.it, the contract contains a second termination clause tied to Red Bull's position in the constructors' standings at the end of the 2026 season. If the team doesn't finish in the top two, Verstappen will have another opportunity to leave Red Bull even after the October deadline passes. Red Bull currently sits in 4th place in the Constructors' Championship, 130 points behind second-placed Ferrari and 43 points behind third-placed McLaren. To climb back to second place, Red Bull would need to make up an enormous gap in just 12 races. a feat that, given the RB22's current performance, appears extremely unlikely. Comment below whether you think Verstappen will trigger the exit clause, or whether you think he'll stay at Red Bull despite everything, because this decision could completely redefine the Formula One grid for years to come. Red Bull has understood the seriousness of the situation and attempted a desperate move. They offered Verstappen an estimated sum in the tens of millions of dollars to give up the exit clause tied to the driver's standings. But Verstappen categorically refused. He didn't want to give up his contractual right to leave the team. This refusal is an extremely powerful signal that says far more than any public statement. Verstappen wants to keep every possibility open. And Formula One history teaches that when a world champion refuses to commit to his own team, the consequences are always dramatic. He wants to have the power to decide his own future without being tied to a team that, at the moment, isn't able to give him a competitive car. Despite several meetings with Red Bull GmbH leadership, including Oliver Mintzlaff and Mark Mateschitz, Verstappen continues to refuse to publicly confirm his stay with the team for 2027. The Dutchman wants concrete guarantees that Red Bull will be competitive next season. He wants to know that the 2027 project will be capable of fighting for the world title. Without these concrete, verifiable guarantees, Verstappen will sign nothing and will keep open the possibility of leaving Formula One entirely. The Dutchman has already threatened to retire from the championship due to his deep dissatisfaction with the current regulations, and no one in the paddock rules out that he could actually do it. Further complicating the situation is the budget problem. The damage caused by accidents during the 2026 season is eroding Red Bull's cost cap in a worrying way. According to several sources, the team has spent between £1,400,000 and £1,700,000 on RB22 repairs in just the first half of the season. Hajar's crashes in Miami and Monaco cost between £840,000 and £1,230,000. Verstappen's off-track incidents in Austria and at Silverstone, both caused by the failure of the faulty Macarena wing, added another £561,000 to the damage bill. Every crash not only puts the driver's safety at risk, but also erodes the financial resources needed to develop the car. These numbers seem small compared to the annual cost cap of £165 million, but in the context of the development race, they become enormous. Red Bull has already introduced 37 upgrades in the first half of the season, the same number as McLaren and far more than Mercedes, which has brought only 21. Every pound spent on repairs is a pound that can't be invested in development. And with Red Bull desperately needing to improve the RB22 or invest in the 2027 project, these financial losses could prove decisive in the second half of the season. Mercedes' Toto Wolff has already publicly raised the issue of the sustainability of the development race within the limits of the cost cap. Red Bull's situation is the most critical since the team's founding. A driver who refuses to commit to the future. A teammate who's challenging him like no one ever has before. A budget under pressure from accumulated damage costs. A car that its own driver calls impossible to drive. And 2 contractual clauses that could free Verstappen before the end of the year. Formula One has never seen such an explosive combination of factors concentrated in a single team. What happens between September and December will determine the future not only of Red Bull, but of the entire competitive balance of Formula One for years to come. See you in the next video.